You know, I've had some intense stuff happen in the past 24, 48 hours. I am an admin and group owner of a group on Facebook called Vintage Flex Fountain Pens, which I don't talk about that often here. But one of the people on the board, well, in the group, Otto Yang, who's an old friend of Pierre Gustafson's, and he's becoming an old friend of mine. And Gustafson's becoming an old friend of mine, sort of. Both of them, kind of. And yeah, we've had a lot of really pretty incredible conversations, actually, over the years. And anyway, in this group, one of the people who's a member is somebody who's a seller who everybody's been really happy with for years and years and years. And I've known this person online anyway in a really pleasant context. And I know that a bunch of people I know and really think are pretty wonderful, at least through knowing them online, have felt the same way about this seller. But this seller posted in my group, and I don't have many of them, and I have some pretty good rules about, like, hey, don't be obvious about it. I'm actually gonna have to tamp it down a little bit. It's looking a little bit too seller-ish, and that's not what I want in the group. But anyway, uh one of this seller posted a video of yeah, a writing sample with a nib, and it was clearly flexed too much. And Otto Yang brought up this whole conversation, and it's huge. It blew up. It's been really big, and I think it's an important subject. Uh, I don't think there are some quick, easy answers here, really, but I think it's important to understand kind of what's going on here, what's at stake, and what we do know about it, and what best practices are, and how best to think about this. I think you need to understand it from a really fundamental perspective. Um, what were these things? What were they expected to do? What did people do with them routinely, ordinarily? What was demonstrated to be reasonably safe in terms of its usage? What do we know about it now that seems to be unsafe in terms of how the stuff has been used? There are a lot of things that are different about all these different nibs. There's a lot of conversation about, what makes for good flex and a flexible nib, the differences between flexible fountain pen nibs from the first 20 or 30 years or so, or even 40 and even a little more years of the 20th century and before. The differences between fountain pen nibs and gold Victorian nibs, both of which can be flexible, the shapes of them, and so on. There's a lot to it. But I think we need to understand what they came from, what they were expected to do. And there was something that I wrote in response to one of the many threads that was going on, and it's been a really contentious one. With another seller kind of saying, "Hey, you know, you ought to know better. Basically, you shouldn't be flexing these nibs so much." So there's and I'm in this terribly awkward situation where I'm kind of in the middle of all of this, and I really want what's best for everybody. I don't want to destroy somebody's livelihood. This is a good person from that I've been able to tell. She's been very nice to me. Oops, I let the cat out of the bag. It's a woman, but anyway, it's part of it. But not that that figures into anything. That just limits who it could be. But anyway, um, and this person was very kind to me in all disclosure and sent me a pen several years ago, just out of the blue, which is very nice. I'm like, well, I wasn't asking for that. It's really sweet. But I had my questions too, like, how are you able to have this incredible amount of line variation with every pen you sell, even ones that are pretty modest, and a lot of them are very inexpensive, and so on. And so I saw this video and I was like, oh god, it looks like she really is applying too much pressure when she's using it. So anyway, there was this contentious thread going on in the group, which is unfortunate, but it was getting at a lot of truths, and I'm trying to plow through this and soften the blow of it, but keep it there because it's an important discussion. And I wrote this, and I think it's kind of a good sort of summation of kind of what's at stake and what's going on. And I just said, there is so much to say. I'm tired of having to say it, but here goes. Too many people selling vintage flex fountain pens push their nibs too far and give people new to them the false impression that these nibs can do more than they can and more than they were intended to do. And a lot of them get destroyed in the process. We have ways of knowing how to use these nibs. We have physical written examples of what these nibs did in the real world. We have literature from the manufacturers of these nibs that promises far less dramatic line variation from them than today's sellers do. We have examples of these nibs that have been overflexed due to misuse and misunderstanding of how they work, usually due to a lack of understanding about how these nibs work, and how they were intended to be used, and how they were used. In an ever-competitive contemporary world of selling fountain pens online, where visuals really matter, dramatic line variation really catches everyone's eyes, so the race is on to show how much line variation a nib can produce. This creates a kind of extreme vintage flex line variation arms race, where it's all about creating the most sexy photos of extreme line variation possible. I remember having to, or starting to have this conversation with everybody in the pen club I belonged to, and the way it was framed was interesting, if a little skewed, but not wrong at all. An artist, and for want of a better term, our moderator, co-moderator, facilitator, co-founder, asked me why there was such a fascination with the most extreme line variation from vintage flexible nibs. I felt like the answer was obvious. It's an incredible feat of engineering that gives tremendous control to the artist, the calligrapher, the writer, the accountant, the illustrator, the stenographer, the doodler, the crossword puzzle solver, the grocery store shopper, the recipe writer, the doughboy's love letter from a French trench in World War I writer, the postcard writer, the QSL card writer, the novelist, the poet, the treaty signatory. But he was also absolutely right. Does a painter have only one brush for every stroke of every painting? Pierre Gustafson, artist, calligrapher, big brother, and older, much better, even more pen-centric version of me, is right. There's something beautiful about a subtly varied fine line, a real elegance in it that's forgotten in a world racing to an ever fatter line from a whisper of a hairline. Otto Yang did a beautiful thing by convincing Pierre to find the subtle grace in the barely flexible Waterman's accountant nib. The bad news is that a lot of vintage flex nibs get ruined along the way. It isn't supposed to be about selling old pens with amazing nibs right this second, to anybody, by any means necessary. It's about doing all that we can to learn about them, and learning how they want to be used. They were designed to flex, of course. That's fine. They should be used, and they should flex, unless they're perfect and rare, but that's another story. The thing is that we should learn as much about them as possible and endeavor to preserve them as long as possible. We are stewards. We are caretakers. We are carers, as the British say, and it really is the perfect word. We care about the nibs, about the people using them. We need to understand how they were designed to be used, how they were used, how they can be used safely, and how they can be preserved. This is not impossible, and we have much of the information about how to do it. I propose that we just make this situation better so that the nibs are preserved and more people are able to love and enjoy and preserve them for as long as possible. They're a big part of our legacy. This is important and beautiful stuff, you know. And I think it is, you know. And yeah, it's just a great way to remember people and things that ever matter to anybody. Like, I'll just show you a couple of things over here. Here's a graphic I found who knows where. And I've shown this before, but it's pretty cool. It shows stresses on a nib. And it's something we can measure. You know, it's observable. We have this. Otto Yang, who is great, made this infographic, which is phenomenal. I've used it many times in my group. And this image here, for some reason, was appropriated from a mirror site of David Nishimura's website. So that's kind of amusing. He found that funny. Whatever. Anyway, David Nishimura has an article, which I'm not showing right now, but it's a good one, where he's talking about seeking and using vintage flexible nibs. It's on his blog. It's worth reading. Succinct, really to the point, which is great. But there's a whole thing about how you use these things. You part of it is feel, part of it is experience. Sure, part of it is just plain using them carefully and lightly initially. Let me get a little bit of something entertaining here. Here we go. All right, that should work. All right. This is I mean, I've shown this a million times, but it's such a great pen. I'm really loving it. It has a lot of flexibility, and I mean a lot. But it's really easy to use and forgiving. And it's a lot of fun. Let's see if this is going to work. And the thing is, you're trying to figure out if you're going too far, right? All right, you don't want to, all right, you want to post this thing, because they knew what they were doing back then. If you're using flex, you need to have a light touch. Yeah, a light touch. I meant that. All right, that's wrong. All right, that's noise you didn't want to hear. I don't know how this is going to work. Let's see if this works. Yeah, this is a great pen. Let's zoom in a little bit. I hope it's not too much. That is a bit much, isn't it? I don't know. Go there. See if that's all right. Now, I'm not really pushing on it, you know? I mean, I'm just using the pen. You know, I'm not saying I'm the greatest at this. It's too close, isn't it? I'm still too close. All right, that's better. All right. This is a great nib. This is a great nib. Right? I have to zoom in. Yeah, now I'm running it. This is not working. That's a bit much. But anyway, I think you get the idea. It's a great nib, and I'm not pushing it. There's nothing forced at all. That's a hairline. It's great. See, Pierre, I can do it. I can do a hairline. Zoom in there on that thing. On that T. There it is. See? There's a hairline there. I'm not kidding ya. There really is. But anyway, so it's a feel thing. We'll try to add more to this, but I think you get the idea. I think, sorta. And check out that other video of mine. What is it? Calligraphy with vintage flex fountain pens. It's not bad. Yeah, watch it. Yo.